It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Hello, my viewers. How are you? Hopefully you guys are doing cool. It's warming up out here actually in California, or Southern California where I'm at. So it's warming up and work is slowly starting to pick up, so that's cool. I wanted to start this stream off, and kind of just cover a few things. Number one, I feel like I have to reiterate it every couple weeks, but please, guys, please try not to name the restaurants in the comments, okay? Those are one of the only comments that I delete is when people try to guess restaurant names, so please try to keep that out of there, okay? I got to protect my restaurants, so I feel like I have to say that because I constantly have to go through and delete those comments. So whether the guesses are right or wrong, and some of you guys, you probably know where I'm working because you recognize the same chains and stuff, but try to keep it out of there because we're just trying to protect the restaurants. And try not to draw attention because a lot of the general public doesn't understand what's truly disgusting and what's not, and they see stuff in my videos and they think it's the worst thing in the world when in fact it's really not that bad. We as HVAC techs, we run into a lot of stuff out in the field, and I was reading some comments before the stream right now, and people were talking about the wiring. That's something I get all the time, especially people from other countries that talk about our package units, like the carrier package units and how horrible the wiring is in those, and and in a lot of different things. And it's true, there is a lot of equipment out there where it seems like the manufacturers aren't trying very hard to make it neat and pretty, and service friendly. But it is what it is, and that's what we have to deal with. So, we do our best and we just do our jobs and try to make it right as best as possible. You can only polish a turd so much, so, but I really appreciate you guys making it to the live stream. You guys are awesome. All the support. I got to say thank you so much. And I don't even think I really acknowledge this either. As my channel passed like 100,000 subscribers here, I don't know, back in December or something like that, it's awesome. And that's because you guys are watching these videos. So thank you so very much. Okay. I really do appreciate all of you guys. And I really do read, or at least attempt to read, every single comment that comes through on the YouTube channel. So I do appreciate when you guys leave feedback. Okay. So that's awesome. And I really appreciate the words of encouragement. I appreciate the criticism. I've learned from some of the criticism. Okay. I feel like as service technicians, we can all learn, right? And, you know, we're not always correct and we all make mistakes. And if we can learn from those mistakes, then good, you know? And I certainly learn all the time. There's something new, you know, someone will send me a message and say, hey, you know what, you did this wrong. And it's like, okay, you know, let's talk about it. And we'll have a conversation. And it's like, wow, you're right. You know what? I did do that wrong. So I encourage everybody to remember that and try to remember to stay humble. It's really easy. I can remember, I'd say, I don't know, at the 10-year mark, maybe somewhere around the 10-year mark of working in HVAC, that I thought, you know, that I was the king boss. Like I knew everything, right? And I was knocked back down a couple steps. You know, I can remember I was working with my dad, and I can remember my dad telling me, like, you know, slow down, Turbo, you know, like you got to relax and realize, like, just because you've had a good run doesn't mean you know everything. You'll never know everything. And it's those moments that you get too cocky that you usually get knocked down, and you get knocked down pretty hard. So it's important to try to stay humble, stay observant, and always try to learn. You know, I try to all the time. I find that, you know, sometimes I prioritize other things and I don't focus as much on work and stuff like that. But hey, you know, I'm human, right? We all deal with our own struggles at home and different things like that. So, you know, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed too. You know, I've done a few videos on it, and I realized that, you know, there's a lot of people out there that deal with mental struggles and stuff like that. I've dealt with depression, anxiety, you know, issues like that. And it's taken me down dark paths. I've gotten help. I've seen a therapist and a psychiatrist and, you know, all sorts of stuff. You know, there's diagnoses thrown out, bipolar disorder and, you know, other I don't even understand what half the crap means, but everybody deals with something. Okay. Some of us choose to admit it. Some of us choose to bury it and hide it. I was one of the people that buried and hid all my issues. And, that made things worse. That made me angry. You know, and, you know, I've got videos on it. You guys can find it. It's, How We Live the HVACR Life is a series that I did with my wife, and I talk about all that stuff. So if you guys want to check that out, please do. Also, shameless, let's get some advertising out here real quick. If you guys haven't already, please go check out my website, hvacrvideos.com. You can help to support the channel, and get some, you know, shirts, hats, beanies, whatever you guys choose. Really does help to support the channel. Keeps my wife busy too, because that's what she's been doing lately, is packaging everything up and shipping it out. So check it out if you guys haven't already. Okay, again, hvacrvideos.com. So all right, we had 2 videos this last week. I'll definitely get to the chat here in just a few minutes too, okay? So remember to put your questions in caps lock. So we had 2 videos this last week. The first one titled "The Kitchen AC is Not Working," and then the other one was titled "Weird Exhaust Fan Issues." Both of those videos were not too difficult. They were pretty straightforward repairs, but there was some interesting stuff in each one of those, and I'm going to cover that in the things I want to talk about tonight too. I got a whole list of things. So let me have a look at this chat real quick and see what we got going on, seeing if I'm missing anything. Not seeing anything yet. In the vid, you hear me talk about temperature. Sometimes I say degrees. What is that, Fahrenheit or Celsius? Because we use degrees. Okay, yeah. I am in the United States, so I am talking temperature degrees in Fahrenheit is what I am talking. So yeah, you would have to do a Celsius conversion to figure out what it is that I'm talking about. But essentially, I'm keeping for medium temperature and high temperature, like air conditioning, we're keeping our evaporators above freezing. For low temperature and walk-in freezers, we're keeping our evaporators below freezing. But yeah, you can do the conversions or whatever you want to do on that. So, all right. So I had a question from Tony, and this was an interesting question. And you know what? This is a fair question. In all fairness, Tony might be a homeowner, but that's okay. Okay, maybe he's not, and it's okay if he's not too. All right, because this is a very confusing thing. But he's working on a mini split, and when he started it up, he was very curious and kind of concerned because he said the liquid line, after about 10 minutes of running, started frosting, and he was really concerned as to why the liquid line was frosting. Okay. So if you are not comfortable or not familiar with mini splits, majority of the time, okay, it is not actually a liquid line, what people would consider to be the liquid line, typically the 1/4 inch line or something, okay? That would be an expansion line is what I would call it, okay? The metering device typically on mini splits is out in the condensing unit, okay? So the line that typically is going to frost like that is actually going to be the line going to the evaporator after the metering device, okay? So I would call that expansion line, essentially, would be my name. I don't know if there's a better name for it, but it is perfectly normal in most cases for the expansion line to frost. It should have insulation over it. That's typically why we insulate both lines. But yeah, the metering device, usually electronic expansion valve, is typically outside in the condensing unit section of a mini split system. So just keep that in mind. A lot of people will email me and ask me, hey, why is there no liquid line pressure port on these things? Well, because that's not a liquid line. Depending on which mini split you're working on, sometimes if you go dig into the condensing unit, you can actually find a discharge line connection somewhere in the condensing unit. Some units have them, some of them don't, if you need to get discharge pressure. You always want to be cautious about checking refrigerant pressures on mini splits. You always want to lean on the manufacturer, figure out what their recommendations are. But just keep that in mind when you are working with them, okay? They are different in the way that they operate. So let's see what else we got in here. Randy says, an R290 unit with an iced up evaporator, do you de-ice the coil with a torch? No, Randy, I don't, because I typically don't de-ice any evaporators with torches. That's just not my style of doing things. I usually use hot water, whether it be in a pump sprayer or with a hose. Working with R290 equipment, that definitely opens up some more things that we need to be cautious about and being sure that we follow proper refrigeration practices, okay? R290 is a hydrocarbon refrigerant. It is unodorized, 98% pure propane, okay? The propane that you have in your barbecue typically has a lot of moisture in it. If you guys haven't ever run into that, I used to have a travel trailer, and I used to go get propane from the gas station, and I'd have the guy fill up the tanks. And over time, my tanks had a large accumulation of moisture in the bottom of the tanks, and it was actually causing some issues. And that's when I kind of realized, holy moly, there is a lot of moisture in this, okay? And that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons why we don't use barbecue propane for our refrigerators, okay? The other reason is because they add that odorant in there, and that's a contaminant, okay? The R290 refrigerant, it doesn't smell like anything. But yeah, I would not use a torch to defrost an evaporator coil. I would use, I wouldn't even use a heat gun, to be honest with you. I would just use hot water. Hot water can be tricky when you're working on reach-in coolers, reach-in freezers, different things like that, because where's the water going to go? And this is something that I talk with my employees all the time. We just had this conversation the other day because I had a guy working on a reach-in cooler. And whenever we're working on a reach-in, for the most part, I have them empty out all the food in the reach-in. That way we can work properly on it. Now, there's some situations, they're super busy. It's a Friday night. They can't do it. But then they're going to have to deal with me having to come back, because majority of the time I like all the food out of the box. So where I'm getting at is if you're defrosting a reach-in or something like that, yeah, if you're defrosting a coil that's up in the top of the box, the water is going to fall, and that's a problem. I fill the box with pans typically to try to catch most of that water. You do want to be cautious, you know, when you're working on some of the reach-in coolers, such as like Charleston coolers. If you defrost the evaporators and the water starts dripping around the door frame on the Charleston ones, it'll get in and short out the door switch for the light. And that can be a tricky thing too. You got to plug it in and it just trips the breaker consistently until you dry everything out. So be very cautious about where that water's going. Majority of the time when I am defrosting things, what I will do is put pans in the bottom section, and sometimes I'll even tilt the boxes back a little bit so that way, you know, the water has a place to go, especially when I'm cleaning condensers. When you have some of these condensers that are on the top of like a Charleston unit or a Delafield unit, freezers and whatnot, they get filled up with grease, and it can be kind of difficult to clean them without just, you know, a mess going everywhere. So I'll usually take some pans and prop them under the front of the box so that way it pitches back just a little bit, not enough that the box can tip over, but do that so that way the water runs down the back of the box. Because if you have to use coil cleaner, which majority of the time we do, it'll actually stain the stainless steel depending on if it's the really cheap stainless. So you got to be cautious about that stuff. But yeah, hot water is my jam for defrosting coils. Any way I go, I typically don't use a torch or even a heat gun. I used to use a heat gun occasionally when I worked in a hospital setting because it was very difficult to bring water in, and they were really sensitive about water and stuff. But yeah, water's my jam. What do I think of the Sporlin probes? Hunter King, I actually have the Sporlin probes. I got to be honest, I don't get as much use out of them as I probably should. The Sporlin probes are actually great probes. I think, I don't know if I have a video on them or not. I thought I did. I've used them in a couple videos. They have great range on the Sporlin probes, but they are really nice. You definitely want to buy the longer range ones if you haven't, or if you're looking at them, you want to buy the longer range ones that have the little antenna coming off of them. Those ones have great range, and the cool thing about the Sporlin probes too is they did give Measure Quick access to them, so you can use the Sporlin probes in conjunction with the Testo probes, in conjunction with the Field Piece probes, and I'm sure some other ones too, all together and mix and match within Measure Quick. So that's a really cool feature that they have too. So, but yeah, Sporlin probes are very nice. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. What am I missing? Let's see. Okay, so this person's saying that, Flexi's saying that as a ship supplier, you used R22 and it's banned in the EU. Why is that still in use, and for what machines is it for? So yes, R22 is being phased out, okay? R22 is a refrigerant that was commonly used in air conditioning and medium temperature refrigeration for the longest time here in the United States and the rest of the world. You know, it's been deemed environmentally unfriendly and all this different stuff. So it is slowly being phased out in the United States. In no way is it illegal to use. We're allowed to use it, but no longer can they manufacture it. They can't make it in the United States, and they cannot import it into the United States from other countries anymore. So we are left to deal with the reserves that we have, giant warehouses full of R22. Typically, I'd say the most popular thing that it's used on is comfort cooling, air conditioning systems, commercial and residential. So it's slowly being phased out, but in no way is it illegal to use. We're still allowed to use it. So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. Cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get to my list of stuff. Let's see. Refrigeration and Kitchen EQ Tech is saying he ordered a mega ohm meter for a call that keeps tripping the breaker every 3 weeks. I personally do not have experience with an insulation tester or a mega ohm meter. You know what? I have used it once or twice, but they're good to be used, but they have a very small window of where they can be used. You want to be very cautious. If you haven't already, check out the Copeland Bulletin. Just look up mega ohm reading Copeland compressors, or mega ohm reading or insulation test Copeland compressors. And a tech bulletin from Copeland is going to come up about their compressors. And it's really interesting what they have to say is that an insulation test or a mega ohm reading is not the best way to check whether or not a hermetically sealed compressor is good or bad. And to sum up what they have to say in there, because if the refrigerant oil has a lot of moisture in it, it can give you a false reading that could make you think that the compressor is potentially bad, when in fact the oil just needs to be cleaned up. So you just want to be cautious. Now, Copeland doesn't say that you can't use them, but Copeland basically says you want to be very cautious, and the best way to use an insulation test or a mega ohm reading on a compressor is to do a test over time and take a lot of parameters down, ambient temperatures, different things like that, and watch it and just watch the trends of things that happen within the system. So just keep that in mind. But mega ohm readers or insulation testers, I still firmly believe are a great tool. It's just you have to understand how to use them. I would be very cautious personally myself about using the ones that say, you know, that just have lights on them that say good or bad, different things like that, because, you know, that doesn't do a whole lot for you. I'd rather see a number and then understand what that number means versus just a light that says good or bad. Personal opinion, not trying to attack any one company or anything like that, okay? You know me, I don't want to talk too much crap about it, so. All right. See what I'm missing in here. All right. S-Man versus Field Piece probes. I have them both, and I love them both. I like using my S-Man manifold when I'm working on refrigeration racks. When I know for sure I'm going to be charging a system, I'm still kind of old school, so I'll still tend to grab my actual manifold gauge set. It's interesting. When I typically work on air conditioning systems, I immediately grab my smart probes, my JobLink probes, and take those up on the roof with me. So but I'm also a creature of habit, and it's interesting, and it takes time for me to get on the track of just using probes all the time. I was just having this discussion with my buddy Adam from the HVAC Overtime channel, and we were talking about probes and using a manifold, and I was just explaining, like, I do charge with my probes. I'll charge a system, charge an air conditioner, and different things like that. But it's still kind of a creature of habit kind of a thing to grab the manifold set and use that. So I pulled an evacuation using my manifold set today on a tiny little reach-in cooler that was too difficult to get all the giant probes and vacuum hoses and everything inside of it. It was a little tiny thing. So I mean, there still is a place for me with the manifold, so I still keep both. But I really do, I would say that it's getting close. I'd say I probably use my probes 80% of the time, the manifold 20% of the time. So just my stance on it. Please, guys, if you haven't already, smash the like button or the thumbs up button on the stream. It'll definitely help us out, okay? So with this equipment, and I kind of talked about it a little bit. I said, especially from the European countries, I get people emailing me saying, the wiring's horrible in my units and different things like that. So how is it that these manufacturers get away from that wiring, or get away with that wiring, right? You would think that Underwriters Laboratory or whatever, certification company, would make sure that, this isn't approved or anything like that. My opinion, this is my opinion solely. I do not know this to be factual, but I believe the way that these manufacturers get away with this crappy looking wiring and different things like that is because of the way that they classify their equipment. And I believe, sometimes you'll see wires run, through a chase without any conduit in a package unit, and I think it's because it's part of that air conditioning unit itself that it's acceptable to have wires just running through there without conduit or anything like that. I don't know if that's completely factual, but again, it's just one of those things we have to deal with, we don't, unless you get into really high-end equipment, for the most part, electrical is pretty crappy for the most part, the way that they run it in our air conditioning systems and stuff. And I'm even guilty sometimes of being lazy and doing things like using SO cord and running it at, to a temperature controller in a walk-in cooler. I get a lot of people that give me grief for that, oh, someone can grab that cord and rip it off the wall or whatever. I get it, but also there's sometimes it's just what's practical. Sometimes it's not practical to run a conduit from a temperature controller to an evaporator coil. So I'm not perfect, and certainly in no way will I ever be perfect. So, and it's also something that's fair that I say, and I think I'm pretty open with this and discuss this as much as possible, but I genuinely do not know everything, and I don't think that I'm better than anybody else. In fact, sometimes I feel like an imposter syndrome kind of a thing, because I'm just a normal service tech. That's the way I see myself. And I know it to be true. I'm just a normal service technician. Okay. I guess I would say it's fair to say that I have an ability to kind of step back and look at things, my whole big picture diagnoses thing that I preach all the time. But I mean, in general, I'm just a normal service tech, guys. I break things. I screw things up. I make mistakes. I oversize. I undersize. As long as the biggest thing in my opinion is, as long as we can learn from that stuff, I hope that we can grow and become better. But I'm not some holy whatever person that knows everything. I don't know everything. And I'm learning stuff all the time. And I think it's important too, as service technicians, that we know when to say, I don't know how to do this. Okay. It's very important. Of course, I don't want someone to be afraid of everything, but I also want you to know your limitations. And I'm not afraid to tell a customer, hey, this is beyond my scope of work. In fact, I can think of an instance where I was working for a hospital customer many years ago, and they asked me to go work on an ultra low freezer. And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm not super comfortable working on ultra lows. And this was a cascade system, 2 compressors, well, 2 condensing units essentially, but it was a whole thing. And I wasn't super comfortable, and I got there and I looked it over and I was like, man, this just isn't my jam. Like, I'm just not confident. I'd rather you call a company that specializes in this. And I walked away, and I just told him, I said, look, I got to be fair and honest here. This is not my thing. So you need to call someone else to work on it. And we need to know when to do that kind of stuff, because The way that I look at it is, you know, as a business is callbacks are the end of the world. And especially when you're working in the pharmaceutical side, which I've done a little bit of work for, you know, that stuff is critical. You know, you can have a refrigerator that just looks like a basic refrigerator that has hundreds of thousands of dollars in medication or vaccines or whatever in it. I can remember working on a chemotherapy refrigerator that they kept the chemotherapy medicine in that was lead lined. Like it's insane. And it's the tiniest little refrigerator, and it has, you know, I think one time they told me it was like almost $1 million in medication in it, you know? And it's like, that's the kind of stuff when you really got to step back and be like, all right, you really need to know what you're doing when you're working on this, because, you know, there's going to be ramifications if bad things happen or callbacks happen or different stuff like that. Interestingly enough, when I was doing that work, haven't done it for a few years, it was really cool because there was no question about it. The hospital that I was working for, they were super on top of things. And like, if I told them like, hey, we need to replace the condensing unit, the evaporator and everything, boom, done, approved. Like they were, I did like that part of it. It was just, there was so much work I couldn't keep up with it, kind of a thing. So, and it was fun doing the hospital work. It was, but I've talked about it before too, but it was kind of a strain on me because I didn't feel comfortable sending some of my other service technicians at the time to go do the hospital work. So I constantly had to be there. So I felt like something sitting on my chest all the time, because even if I wasn't on call, if a call came in for one of those units at the hospital, like I had to stop what I was doing to go, and it just felt like a burden. So, I ended up losing that customer to for other reasons. You know, I didn't let them go. They ended up letting me go. And I certainly could have done things better, but in the end, it was actually a blessing in disguise, kind of a thing. So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. What do we have? I see. Let me see what else. 448 versus 449. I see Pro C's asking Dallas Ralph that question. Any differences? Okay, got you. Using either, yeah, I've always been a 448A fan. I've never used 449. I know they're very similar, just different manufacturers is my understanding. I'm sure Ralph will be able to help you out a little bit more. And in fact, what I will do is go ahead and put Ralph's email in the chat right now. If anybody does have any refrigerant related questions, feel free to send Ralph an email, and I'm sure he can help you guys out. So let's see what else we got in here. Let me see. Going through the questions here. Looks like I'm not seeing too much. Make sure if you guys do have questions, you put out in put them in caps lock. Okay. So why in my videos, and this is a question I get all the time too, and I've answered this a million times, but it's fine. I don't mind answering these questions again. So why do I not use a GoPro? Okay. I don't use a GoPro because I get motion sickness, guys, and editing the video from a GoPro, there's something about the way GoPros, because they're attached to your body, they move a lot and stuff, and that just makes me nauseous. So yeah, that's why I typically don't use a GoPro. I have them. I'll put them on a tripod every once in a while to get like second B-roll footage and stuff like that. But for the most part, I get these questions all the time. I film everything with my phone. It's a Galaxy S10 Plus, and it works great. It has an amazing microphone. In fact, I said this before too. I have a Note S20 Ultra, whatever, you know, they got too many dang letters and numbers after the phones, but I have, you know, the biggest badass Note phone that they have, and I actually find that the camera is really good in the Note phone, but the microphone sucks. So I really prefer, and in fact, you guys have even said it too, the day that I first used my new Note 20 whatever phone, someone said, what happened to the mic? Like, and it was like, I knew it too when I was doing the footage, like there's a difference. So yeah, I really like the S10 Plus for filming. It is my favorite phone to film with. So let's see what else. Yeah, smash the thumbs up button, guys. It really does help out the stream. So Field Piece heated diode leak detector versus the Accutrek ultrasonic leak detector. So they're totally different leak detectors. They both have different functions and uses. An ultrasonic is not for me. I've demoed an ultrasonic before. In fact, I've demoed the Accutrek ultrasonic leak detector, and it just didn't become useful for me. But my buddy Rick from HVACR Survival uses, I remembered his YouTube channel this time, but Rick from HVACR Survival uses ultrasonic leak detector, and he likes it. So it's to each their own. So keep it in mind. You know, the traditional heated diode leak detector or infrared leak detector, You know, those are great leak detectors. I've used those style my entire career. I'm not a fan of the ultrasonic just because you got to wear headphones. And my experience using the ultrasonic was whenever you would use it near neon lights, it was a problem because you could hear the neon light hissing sound, and it was just not my style. Okay, so but again, I'm not saying don't buy one. I mean, if it's what you're looking for, go for it. You know, any tool that we can have in our arsenal to make our job easier. We don't necessarily use every one of our tools every single day, but you know, sometimes it's nice to have a certain tool for a certain function. The one thing I didn't try with the ultrasonic leak detector when I was testing it out was I did not get the opportunity to try to find a bearing with it, like a bad bearing or something. And that was something that I kind of thought about after the fact. Was it would have been neat to try to listen to different bearings to hear the sounds and then know when you can hear one going dry or something like that. That would have been an interesting test to do with the ultrasonic. So if one of you guys has that, I encourage you guys to try that. You know, there's so many tools out there. And one thing I'm going to say too, and this is kind of a gripe that I have with most supply houses, right? You know, most supply houses, they don't know about the new tools. I can walk into one of my supply houses and pull at least 2 to 3 tools off my truck and show them to the supply house manager. And he'd be like, what? When did this come out? And I'd be like, dude, I've had this for years. You know, so supply houses unfortunately don't have all the information at their fingertips. It's interesting because a lot of us in the trade, especially the older guys, I'll consider myself an older guy. I've, you know, been doing it a while, but you know, we tend to rely on the supply houses, especially from the past. I was taught to listen to everything the supply house manager said. And that was good for a long time, but then you run into other supply houses and you think you can do the same. And then you find out that manager doesn't know what he's talking about. Different, you know, that's a whole nother tangent to go off on. But oftentimes these supply houses don't even know that most of these new tools are coming out or even exist. And I think that's a really cool place for, you know, these social influencers or whatever you want to call us, guys that make videos on YouTube or podcasts. You know, we have our fingers on tools before supply houses even know they exist. There's another problem that I find with supply houses too, is oftentimes, and I don't know the technical terms for it, but they have like, you know, manufacturers representatives that rep certain brands. And so they'll bring in all the brands that rep covers, right? And oftentimes, and this is just my opinion, I don't know this to be fact, but I tend to notice that if they have a certain rep that, you know, markets certain products, parts and tools and different things, they often will get pushback from that rep. At least my opinion is that they'll get pushback from that rep if they try to bring in their competitors' stuff, because it's not very often that you find 2 major competitors of tools in a supply house. Sometimes, you know, that's just my opinion, you know, because I've asked managers like, hey, why don't you carry Refrigeration Technologies products? And they're like, well, because corporate doesn't let us. And they've kind of alluded to me that it has to do with the fact that they're really big with whatever name of brand, you know, a competitor of Refrigeration Technologies. So they don't want to bring in the competition, you know, which is interesting because it's kind of the supply house not realizing what us service technicians want out in the field, in my opinion, you know, and then you have someone like me that'll make a video and say, hey, look at this new product that I found and you can get it from this online supply house. Of course, I wish I could push my local supply houses better or more, you know. True Tech Tools is a great supply house. They really are, at least for tools. But, you know, I want to support local, but local doesn't have the tools that I want. So I tend to push people to True Tech Tools because they do have them and they're cutting edge and they have tools before anybody else does. So there needs to be a shift here, you know, with our supply houses when it comes to products and chemicals and tools and different things like that. The supply house, in my opinion, should be educating me. I, as a service technician, should not be educating the supply house. And I realize, you know, I have a little bit of a different thing going on because whatever you want to call me, a social influencer or whatever, like, yeah, you know, I have reach and people reach out to me and stuff, but still, you know, I feel like supply houses should have more of these tools. And I will say too, I know I'm going off on a super rant on this, but I will say too that, again, not completely understanding the supply house, but I could only imagine that the supply houses probably have to purchase all this stuff up front. And if it doesn't sell, I bet you there's some issues with things sitting on their shelves forever. Because I can think of some supply houses that I can go in and see some field piece stuff on the shelf that's been replaced 2 times since that product was being used, and it's still on their shelf, and it's like, why, you know? So obviously they're stuck with it. So, you know, maybe there's something going on there too, but you know, I'm ranting at this point. Let me look at the chat and see what I'm missing in here. I do that a lot. If you guys haven't noticed, I tend to go off on these rants. As a student in HVACR, Sal asks, and oh, I see your comment there, Justin. My moderator, Justin, says GoPros have very poor audio, and that is true. They do have poor audio. You can get around that, though, with the Rode Wireless Go, wireless lav mic and stuff. But yes, they typically do have bad audio on the GoPros, and they tend to have a fisheye on the lens, too. You got to do some stuff in post to kind of make the fisheye go away. So Sal asks, as a student in HVACR, what are good areas to specialize in? HVACR is a broad area, right? Heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration. And then within that, you can go into commercial heating and air conditioning, go into residential, you can go into industrial. You can say the same for refrigeration, all of them, okay? So do what you can get. I mean, focus on where you can get a job, focus on your education, okay? And just work your way up. Start with a company, see what you like, see if you can intern or do an apprenticeship and work your way up. You know, you can watch videos from people, from myself, from other people, and you can, you know, kind of see like, hey, I like restaurant stuff, looks interesting. Like that's what I do. Or, you know what, restaurant stuff is too greasy and too fast paced. You know, maybe you want to go into more of a residential air conditioning setting. But if you go in the residential side, you're probably going to be pushed a little bit more into the sales side. Okay. There's still some companies that are not heavy on sales, but majority of the residential companies out there are heavy on sales, and they're just pushing new equipment left and right. And then they have installers that do that, you know, the installations, and then they move on. So, you know, it just depends, but all areas of this industry, you can make very good money in almost all the different areas. You can be a service technician, you know, depending on if you like to be an active person, you can get into the restaurant stuff or the supermarket stuff, but you can also go work in an institutional setting for like a hospital or a school and, you know, work 9 to 5, no overtime, you know, be home for weekends and all that stuff. I mean, there's so many different things. If you get into the restaurant side, you're going to be getting some overtime. You're going to be doing on call. If you get into the supermarket side, you're absolutely guaranteed to do insane overtime, and you know, you're on call quite a bit. And so, I mean, there's so many different aspects of it. So I love this trade. You know, the thing I hate about this trade is running a business. Running a business is frustrating for me, but I'm not a good business person, you know? So, but my favorite part is just talking with customers and fixing stuff. It's almost therapeutic for me. When I'm stressed out because of things, you know, I just want to go run service calls and fix things. I love it. I still do. Yeah. All right. Let me see what else we got going on in here. If I miss things, just keep reposting it in caps lock. How to prevent condenser corrosion. You know, there's a couple different methods that you can do. Refrigeration Technologies has a coil coating spray that you can actually spray on a condenser that will actually help. I've used it a few times. There's a process that you have to use. It's kind of an epoxy coating that you spray on the condenser, typically when it's brand new, but I mean, I'm sure you can do it when it's mid-use too. But yeah, coil coating is probably going to be one of the best things. You can have coils professionally quoted by certain companies. You can have package units and air conditioners completely coated, evaporators and condensers. But, you know, after the fact, on our side of it, after you've installed equipment, I'd highly suggest you check out Refrigeration Technologies. Refrigetech.com, I think, is their website. And you can go there, and they have a coil coating that'll work good. I have a video on my channel. I don't know what it's titled, though, where I show the coil coating process. Send me an email at hvacrvideos@gmail.com and ask me about Refrigeration Technologies coil coating, and I can get you more information if you're interested. So let me see what else. Field Piece or Fluke multimeters. Hey, both of them make great meters. Field Piece, I would say, is more tailored toward the HVAC technician. They have more features typically built into their meter for specifically HVAC technicians. If you buy a Fluke, you're typically going to get a higher end meter. I'd say the Field Piece definitely give accurate, good numbers. But the Field Piece, I mean, the Fluke is going to be more of, you know, super, super accurate numbers. Fluke is going to cost a little bit more. My jam is the Field Piece SC480. That meter has everything that I need it to. It's a clamp meter. It has phase rotation. That's one of my favorite features when doing startups on new 3-phase equipment, is I can check the phase rotation before I even start it up. But the Fieldpiece SC480, that is my favorite meter right now. There's going to be a link in the show notes of this video. If you guys don't already know, every one of my videos, anybody's YouTube videos, for the most part, should have some sort of show notes. So they call it the description of the show notes. If you're on a computer screen, there's like a little drop-down arrow. You hit it, and boom, there's going to be affiliate links. There's going to be my mailing address, you know, all kinds of stuff in there. So feel free and check out other people's stuff too, because there's usually really good information. I usually have links to all the tools that I use in that video and different stuff like that. So let me see what else we got going on in here. Okay, so Peter had asked some questions. Peter says, demo the dial-a-charge that I have in the background. And then there was actually another question from someone asking about the Simpson meter that I have up there. So I have a couple older tools in the background. So this dial-a-charge right here is before we had super accurate digital scales, this is what they would use in the industry to figure out a very critical or precise refrigerant charge, okay? To be fair and honest, I've never used that dial-a-charge. That was before my time. One of my service technicians, actually, his dad bought it at a garage sale and gave it to me. So I've never used the dial-a-charge. I don't even know if my dad ever used the dial-a-charge, to be honest with you, because I think they always had scales, even when my dad started in the trade. As far as the Simpson meter, that was my dad's Simpson. I think that's a Simpson 260, I think. And that was my dad's meter. It still works to this day. I don't use it, obviously, but I just use it because I just have it up there because I think it's cool. It was just sitting in our shop. And then next to that, I actually have an ANI, or a hermetic compressor analyzer. And I didn't use that ANI. One of my technicians actually gave me that too, but I used another one. I don't have it in here right now, but I used a bigger one by, I think, Thermal Engineering or something like that. But the hermetic compressor analyzer was a way that in the field, by using alligator clips and different things like that, we could start a compressor and run it forwards and backwards and test a few things just to see if it was good or bad before we drove to go get starting components. So, all right, let's see what else we got going on in here. Why don't I use the Hvacr H10 Pro? Never used one. Never had a need to. I started out with a CPS leak seeker, that yellow thing. Oh my gosh, we would break the wands on that thing all the time. And then worked my way into the D-Tech Select, which I used for many years with the D-Tech Select. And then I have the Inficon Stratus now, which replaced the D-Tech Select. And then very soon, I'm going to have a new leak detector. So that's all I can say about that right now. How's the Viper condensate pan and drain cleaner work? Good. Jeffrey, to be fair, I've never used the pan and drain treatment, but I have heard really good things about it from the people on the East Coast over at HVAC school. My buddy Brian Orr, he does a lot of videos on it, and I've heard some really good results from them over there. Because we typically don't have humidity here, we don't get that slime buildup in our drains for the most part. So we have no need for, or at least I haven't had a need for the pan and drain treatment yet. But like I said, I've heard really good things about the pan and drain treatment. So what job-related tasks get harder for HVAC techs to do as he approaches retirement? Well, as an HVAC tech approaches retirement, we're going to assume that he's getting older, and we're going to assume that he's getting heavier in weight, okay? Assuming that, because that's the trend that we go here in America, right? So assuming that, it's going to be harder and harder to lift your tool bag as time goes on. It's going to be harder and harder to climb into some of the weird access panels and attics and different things like that. Working in restaurants like I do, it would be harder for an older technician to climb into attics. Of course, I'm not saying every technician is overweight and out of shape like me, but I mean, as you get older, that's kind of the trend that we go. So HVAC techs, and I get this question quite often from people too, like, hey, am I too old to get into the trade at 50 years old? I say, no, you're not too old to get into the trade at 50 years old, but you're going to have some hurdles, and you're going to need to specifically focus on certain parts of the trade more likely, you know, institutional type work, education facilities, schools, and different things where the demand isn't high. But, you know, dealing with restaurants and, you know, climbing in attics and different things like that is definitely going to get harder and harder as you get older. So let's see what else we got in here. All right, I'm going to go to my list of things to talk about. So, one thing I do want to encourage, and I do this a little bit in my videos, I haven't been doing it as much, is disassembling things, okay? Let me step back here. I encourage everybody to get their grinder out very carefully and start cutting components up. Whether it be expansion valves. These ones I cut with a bandsaw using a Portaband jig, and I, sliced the expansion valve. I disassembled it, sliced it, put it back together so you can see the working components. Same thing with this head pressure control valve. But what I'm encouraging people to do is like compressors, When you change a compressor, I encourage everybody out there, if it's a semi-hermetic, it's a no-brainer. You just unbolt everything and take it apart. Little fun fact, if it's a Copeland compressor and it's under warranty or you're getting a core charge, they have no problem if you disassemble it. All that they want is the parts back. Even if you just got to shove them in the compressor and put the head back on and call it a day, they're okay with that. So I encourage everybody, and so does Copeland, encourages people to take compressors apart because you can learn. You can learn what copper plating does. If you have a compressor that's drawing locked rotor amps and, but you can still feel it turning, when you cut it open, I bet you're going to find a lot of copper plating, causing issues within there. And so I encourage everybody to open things up, cut them open, learn how they work. It was forever. It probably took 15 years into my career before I cut open a compressor. Really, like it took me forever to cut them open. It just wasn't something that interested me, and I probably should have done it sooner because you learn so much once you start cutting them open. I've cut quite a few open now, on video, actually shown them, and it's really interesting, to see that the failures, and it's like, wow, I found some compressors that literally failed because of metal fatigue inside the compressor, but I found majority of the compressors I find were killed because, copper plating or burnout, they had a short to ground, things like that. So, but it's very interesting once you start cutting open components and learning how they work. Holy moly. Philip, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That is amazing, man. That is awesome. All of this stuff helps. So thank you so very much. That's amazing, Philip. You're the man, bud. All right, let me see what I'm missing in here. Do I ever work on mini splits? It's not very often, Thomas, that I work on mini splits. I've installed probably 5 or 6 in my career. I've worked on probably, 30, 40 of them. But, it's not something that I do a lot in my videos. It's not something that I'm afraid of by any means. But I will say the mini splits that I have worked on, sometimes depending on what brand it is, it can be kind of difficult to get a hold of technical support. I encourage anybody that has refrigerant related issues to start with recovering the charge, evacuating the system, and weighing it back in. That's a really good starting point on most mini splits, unless it's, an obvious electrical problem. So, Philip, again, thanks so much for that super chat, man. You're the man, dude. All right. Let me see what else we got in here. I'm going to go to my list of things to talk about. Let's talk about what happened in my recent video with the exhaust fan issues. I want to talk about the exhaust system in a building and building balance in general, okay? And I kind of briefly touched on it in my video, but when we're walking up to these exhaust systems, we have to think of them as a system. Okay, even if a restaurant is calling us about a singular exhaust fan not working, we have to think about it as a system. An exhaust fan, if you think about it, it pulls air from one place to another. It extracts it majority of the time out of the building, right? We're pulling heat, we're pulling smoke, whatever it is out of the building. If you're working in a medical facility, you're exhausting whatever fumes from whatever, okay? The 98 DeVille, again, thank you so much for that super chat. You guys are amazing with these super chats. Efren, guys, holy moly, thank you so very much. You guys are, wow, this is humbling. Thank you, okay? So when we think about these exhaust fans, we want to think about them as a system, okay? So if an exhaust fan was designed and installed properly, it has to have makeup air. There has to be somewhere for the air that it is extracting to come from. Think about a paper bag. I've shown this example before. If you take a paper bag, a brown paper bag, and you put it over your mouth and you suck, the bag is going to collapse, okay? The building does the exact same thing, except for it's not going to collapse, but it goes into a negative pressure, all right? If we cut a hole in the bottom of the paper bag, the correct size, the bag will no longer collapse and we will suck air directly through the bag. So if you think about an exhaust fan, that is pulling smoke out of a kitchen, we have to have makeup air. You have to replace the air that's being pulled out of the building. So we set up some sort of a makeup air system. Now, when you have multiple exhaust fans, you've got 4 exhaust fans, you really have to start looking at the building even bigger as a giant system, okay? The air conditioners are included in that system too on most new buildings because they're pulling fresh air from those. So understanding the exhaust system is so important when it comes to troubleshooting problems. Now, in my situation, in my recent video, as best as I could tell, the only problem was that the hood filters, that was their main issue. The hood filters were plugged up, but they also, because the cook didn't understand that the makeup air system is meant to diffuse the air where the cooks are, you know, he was cold, so he put cardboard up in there to try to prevent the cold coming through, but that was creating more of a problem. Now, the way that most of the exhaust hoods are designed is they create kind of an air curtain, and that's what they were doing in that situation. The exhaust pulls up through the back of the hood, right? And then the makeup air comes down through the front. And what it's actually supposed to do is create an air curtain. So that way when smoke comes out, it doesn't roll out of the hood. And the makeup air coming down actually goes down right in front. And it's supposed to get sucked up back behind and then create kind of like an air curtain essentially that doesn't allow the smoke to come through. So when the cook started blocking off, KK, thank you so very much for that super chat. That is amazing. Again, thank you guys. You guys are amazing. So when they put that cardboard in there, they thought they were solving an issue, which they were. They were solving an issue of themselves getting cold, but they were creating a bigger issue because they were messing up the air curtain on their hood system, and now smoke had the ability to roll out. Okay, so it's so important. That was an easy call. You know, I went there, everything was working. It was so easy for me to just say, everything's working, call me if it does it again. And it probably would have happened 2-3 more times, you know, if I wasn't a person that was competent with the fans before I realized there's something else going on here, okay? Because of personal experience and the understanding that I have of an exhaust system, I kind of like, hey, wait a minute, let's check the hood filters, let's check these. Now, again, guys, the reason why I know to check the hood filters is because I've been that service tech that went out there and said, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong. Oh, the filters are plugged up, you know, because I didn't catch it on the first time. So just because you see me make a video and say, wow, this guy's really smart, it's because I've made the mistake of not catching it before, but I've learned from my mistake. Okay. All right. Guys, these super chats, thank you so very much. Let me see what I'm missing here. I know I saw a question come up. What is my preferred strategy for avoiding liquid migration, i.e. pump down, CRO valves, crankcase heaters, etc.? Typically, on my refrigeration systems, I get away with crankcase heaters and pump down circuits, okay? So we typically run liquid line solenoid valves down at the evaporator that terminate or that open and close via thermostats. That's pretty common in refrigeration. Same thing for walk-in freezers. If you're dealing with split system air conditioning, the most common way is going to be crankcase heaters, but then in some certain situations, manufacturers ask you to install solenoid valves too, okay? It's very rare that I have to use CRO valves to try to regulate that, but I mean, typically it's going to be crankcase heaters and liquid line solenoid or liquid pump down. I saw another super chat come through. Thank you. Efren, thank you very much, man. That is amazing. You guys are great. Let's see. How often do I see a locked up fan motor from sand in the desert? I'm not going to say that it's from sand in the desert. I'm going to say that it's bearing failure from the heat would be my opinion. I don't think that you're getting sand inside the bearing. I think that, I guess maybe you are. I guess there's really fine particulate sand, but I would say majority of it would probably be heat failure because out in the desert, they can run, you know, ridiculously high temperatures, and those motors' internal temperatures are just getting very, very hot and cooking the bearings. That would be my opinion on the matter. So let me see what else I'm missing in here. How often, I already answered that one. What is a good way to avoid copper plating? Big Joe. The best way to avoid copper plating is not allowing moisture into the system. My vague understanding, and I'm not a genius when it comes to this, but my vague understanding of the copper plating is, you know, it's caused by moisture basically that is in the system that creates corrosive acids and different things like that in the refrigerant, oil, and refrigerant. And it can be prevented if you follow proper refrigeration practices, pulling a proper evacuation, brazing with nitrogen, changing the liquid line filter dryer when any repair when opening the system up. That's the biggest things that can prevent copper plating, in my opinion. It's essentially just pulling proper evacuations. In refrigeration, you're going to see a lot more copper plating because oftentimes, we're pushed to get equipment working before, we can put. Sometimes there's so much moisture in the oil that you just can't pull an evacuation, and they need it up and running. So you got to do what you got to do, and you have to run it, and just throw a new dryer on there and hope that it cleans it up, go out and do a change out or something. But, the damage could already be done, and it's just going to take time. In restaurants, I'm not going to say this in supermarkets, but in restaurants, compressor replacements are a necessary evil. And I have one particular restaurant chain that doesn't bat an eye. In fact, it's very interesting because when I started working for this restaurant chain, and I called him and I was like, hey, bro, we got a bad compressor. Call the facilities director. He's like, all right, cool, change it. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, it's no big deal. And it's like, wow, okay. They're so used to it. Now, they also have a lot of other contractors that work for them, so they change compressors all the time. I don't like changing compressors all the time, but in refrigeration, it happens more often than not because we oftentimes have to get the equipment up and running before it's properly evacuated, and stuff like that. Or we have to run it outside its operating envelope because it's really, really hot outside. And, we had a one heat wave that came through a couple summers back, I'd say 3 or 4 years back. I think I have some videos on it where I literally, it was like 120 degrees outside, and I literally was putting hoses on. I couldn't find hoses because I kept buying hoses from Home Depot and leaving them at restaurants to run misting devices across everything because it was so hot outside that the compressors were all going off on thermal overload and shutting off on high pressure. And, so they sometimes have to operate in crazy environments, and that just causes issues too. So, all right. All right. And let me get in here. We already talked about that. This is something I really wanted to cover. So there was an interesting comment, and I have a counter to this one. There was an interesting comment in my recent video about the exhaust fan when I was talking about the grease filters being dirty. And someone had said, where they used to work, they used to run the grease filters through the dishwasher every night. And I have restaurants that do that, and that actually creates bigger problems, guys. Majority of the time, dishwasher exhaust fans, the ductwork is not set up for grease. So I have a couple restaurants that run their grease filters through the dishwasher all the time. And if you open up or pull the dishwasher exhaust off, the ductwork is full of grease that never gets cleaned because it's not a serviceable grease hood. It's not a serviceable grease duct. It was never designed for grease. It's not a good idea to run hood filters through a dishwasher because it is not designed for that. You're just going to clog everything up with grease and cause a potential fire hazard. Now, the odds of a fire happening in a dishwasher exhaust fan are slim to none, but still, I encourage customers, do not run hood filters through the dishwasher. The proper way that I tell the customers to clean their dish filters is to soak them overnight and then rinse them. Use degreasers, let them soak, then in the morning rinse them down. They like to run them through the dishwasher because obviously these days everybody's concerned about labor. Where was I on the last overtime show? I was working that night. So yeah, I wasn't on the overtime show. I had got home really late that night, working on an ice machine. So anyone who makes a good fin comb? Randy, I have yet to find a fin comb that I can endorse. There's so many different fin combs out there, and I cannot give you one that is the best, okay? I've just accepted the fact that I'm going to buy those packs that have like 6 different ones, and I'm only going to use 2 of the fin combs, the 18-inch and like the 20-inch, and the rest are going to get thrown away, and then I'm going to have to buy another pack and another pack and another pack. I'm a fan of the plastic ones. I don't like the big metal rake-looking ones or anything, but that's just my 2 cents. Have I ever seen any evaporator coil that kept icing up? Many times, but that's kind of a hard question to answer. Are Fasco fans any good? Fasco makes motors, and yeah, they make good motors in certain situations. They're not my favorite condenser fan motor for refrigeration and air conditioning applications, but they do make fractional horsepower motors that are really good. So, all right. What is the longest time I've used a mister device to cool a compressor? I'd say for about 3-4 weeks, and the damage was done because there's calcium buildup all over the condenser, and I've still got restaurants that have calcium all over the condensers. So, all right. You know, restaurants, and I already answered that one too. Ooh, this is a good question. So, on my recent video where I had the kitchen AC that was not working, you know, we had a few things. We had a refrigerant leak on that one, and we ended up cleaning the unit up, changing the dryer, all that stuff, right? And then in the end, when I went to go start it up, I forgot, hey, there was a problem with the thermostat, and I had to change the thermostat in that video. And I knew that I was going to get flack for this. I dropped the thermostat down in the duct. And the reason why I did that was because they have an an EMS system, energy management system, that, you know, they have someone in wherever running their system, and the customer doesn't want to fix it. So the temporary thermostat is the only way we can fix it. But why did I use a fancy Honeywell touchscreen thermostat? And that's a really simple question and simple answer. That's what I had in my truck. And you know, you have to be practical sometimes. Yeah, that was like a $200 something thermostat. And sure, what I pulled out was like a $60 thermostat, right? But for me to leave that restaurant and go get a thermostat where I was located would have been at about 45 minutes to an hour to the supply house and 45 minutes to an hour back. And the amount of money I would have spent in labor, the cost of the thermostat, it was cheaper because I had that in my truck to go ahead and drop that one down. Okay. So sometimes you got to think like that. You got to think like, hey, yeah, this costs more, but it's going to cost me more in labor to drive and go get the cheaper one, you know, and they'll end up spending the same amount of money. So, you know, sometimes you just got to be smart about that kind of stuff. All right, let's see what we got in the chat. What am I missing? Any new tool reviews? There's stuff we're working on, JD. We haven't filmed anything yet, but we have all kinds of work ideas and stuff. We're just busy at work. So, okay, I already answered that question. Let's see what I'm missing here. All right, I don't think I'm missing anything in there. Covered all that stuff. Yeah, time is money for sure. Guys, do me a favor and smash the like button or the thumbs up button. It really does help out the stream. We have 281 people in here, 142 likes. So please smash that, okay? If you guys haven't already too, please check out my website, hvacrvideos.com. Hats, shirts, beanies, sweaters, all that stuff. It helps to support the channel, so check it out. I already mentioned that in the beginning, but I know there's a lot of new people in here right now. Non-polymer leak stop. Is it safe to use? John, I am not a fan of using any leak additives in the system. That's just my personal choice. I have heard from several people that really think that the leak stop sealers, whatever brand you want to use, work fine. I don't trust them myself, okay? I'm not going to endorse any one brand. I'm a fan of refrigeration oil and fixing leaks. That's pretty much all that I like to put in my systems. As I get older, I'm getting more hesitant about running things. You know, for the majority of my career, I was taught to put acid neutralizers in the compressor and different things like that. And it wasn't until later in my career that I really got to thinking like, okay, so if I put an acid neutralizer in there, what happens to the compound when it supposedly neutralizes the acid? Well, where does that go? You know, it's still circulating in the system. Does it plug up the dryer? I don't know. You know, I really started to question. And if you ask almost any compressor manufacturer, not air conditioner manufacturer, reach out to Copeland and Tecumseh, Bristol. Well, Bristol's not super big anymore. Copeland, Tecumseh, Manurup, any of those brands, right? Danfoss, ask them if they're okay with using leak sealers in their compressor. And I bet you a majority of them are going to say no, okay? Just because it says OEM approved on the package, that doesn't mean that every OEM approved it, okay? There might be one or two, but be cautious about that. And majority of the compressor manufacturers are going to say, nah, we're not going to approve any of that stuff. Even though, let's just say Carrier as a brand might approve some kind of additive to their system, right? That doesn't mean that the compressor manufacturer is okay with it. Carrier's just the person that packaged everything and put it together, but the compressor manufacturer is the one that's going to warranty the compressor in some cases, and they might not warranty it if they found out that there was an additive in there. So be very cautious about that. Let me see what else I'm missing in here. What do we got? Do I ever use dye to find leaks? Waylon, I've used it probably 3 or 4 times in my career. I have a dye kit on my truck. I'm not a fan of it. I've used it in weird situations where the customers basically demanded that we use dye to pinpoint a leak, and it just gets everywhere and it's just a mess, and I prefer not to use it. Now, let me be fair and fair to all these manufacturers of acid neutralizers, leak sealers, dye, whatever, insert name brand. I have never once seen actual proof with my own eyes that any of those things harm the system. I've only read documents from each of the manufacturer compressor companies that say don't use them, and this is why, okay? So I'm not saying that they're bad. I just don't trust them myself, okay? So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Let me see what else we got in here. Yeah, when I was thinking about that, Quinn, the CRO, I'm not too worried about that. When someone had asked me earlier about that, now that I think about it, I'm not really worried about that with oil issues. Or refrigerant migration. Again, that's not really going to do a whole lot on, I guess on startup, that could help a little bit. But yeah, anyways. All right. Well, guys, I really, really appreciate you guys making it in here. We're going to go ahead and end this one a little bit early today because I'm kind of tired. And got some stuff I got to get to. So I really appreciate you guys coming into the stream. Thank you so very much, guys. All of you that donated via Super Chat or whatever, you guys are amazing. Please, if you haven't already, check out my website, hvacrvideos.com. And remember, the HVAC Overtime Show this Friday, about 6:05 p.m. West Coast time. We go live. Stay tuned for that. And yeah, I'll catch you guys on the next one. I really appreciate you. And I'm going to queue up my outro. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. I am staring into your soul and telling you to look at the big picture.